Hey everybody, welcome to Ongaku Concept. I'm Joshua, and I'm here with Sax from the OC Discord server. If many of you will be familiar with him if you hang around there. But why don't you introduce yourself, because I think you would do a better job of that than I.
That sounds good. Hi everyone. You may recognize me from the community a little bit. My name's Sax. I was on the Discord server like nearly every day over the past few years until like school and work kind of
Has it been 3
picked
years
up.
at this point?
No, you know what?
I
I don't
guess it
think it's.
has.
I don't know. I mean, I
I think
think
it was around June or July 2016, I think.
nearly 2 or 3. Um,
Yeah.
it feels like a lifetime, honestly, especially when this is all stuff we can. I don't even know where to start, but I have met people from the community and everything. I met up with Sans and Miguel, who were guys on the server, and we've all hung
Yeah,
out.
yeah, I remember
It's,
seeing the photos from that.
Yeah, so it's only been like a year, like it's only been like 2 years or so, but it feels like a lifetime, and I feel very blessed for it.
That's nice.
But yeah, so I'm known by that. I'm also starting this new blog, French Touch Composition, where it kind of focuses on the songwriting and compositional methods of guys like Daft Punk, Justice, just these French dance musicians who also have a tie to a lot of the roots that video game music has, like Yellow
Mm.
Magic Orchestra, all the 70 disco funk artists, like Michael Jackson's a great example, all that sort of stuff.
Kraftwerk.
Kraftwerk too, yeah. I know Daft Punk has mentioned that they're a really big influence as well as Justice.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I'm going to release at the time of the recording, I'm about to release this article on Daft Punk's Human After All, one of their records, and kind of the stuff, some of the rhythmic topics and concepts that we can learn from how they wrote that record. They did it in about 2 weeks, so they really had to,
Really?
yeah, they really had to take some. I don't want to say liberties, but they really had to streamline their writing process and
Yeah,
able to
yeah.
do that. And I explored kind of in the rhythmic plane of composition how they could have done that. But
Hmm.
so look forward to that, or I guess it'll probably be out by the time this is released. But
Yeah. If
uh,
it is, I'll put a link to it in the description.
okay, sweet. Yeah, the website is FrenchTouchComposition.com. We got Twitter page, FT Composition, Reddit, also Discord account, and all that sort of good stuff. So,
Oh, cool.
but yeah, Josh invited me on here to speak and have a conversation
Yes.
about all sorts of musical
Yeah.
topics.
So a few weeks ago, uh, you had brought up to me a topic because I had made a tweet. I was going to bring this up before we started recording, but I forgot to. I was talking about how I feel sort of when I'm writing music, I tend to. Well, I feel like it's not me who's writing exactly sometimes. Uh, and I try to. It's more like I'm trying to reach out and find something.
Yeah, you're like pulling from
And
this abyss.
right, and it's like whatever I manage to uncover or recover, I write down as accurately as I can. And so I feel like, and I try to be mindful of that process and I try to respect it as well as I can,
Hmm.
because at least for the sort of way that I try to approach writing music, if I do that, I always get better results.
Basically, just having a process to subscribe to, and maybe like limitations is the wrong word, just because of some of the stuff, just kind of the picture that paints limitations, but kind of
Mm-hmm.
putting
Yeah,
boundaries on
it's
yourself and on the work in which you can use as a basis to like actually explore within them, right?
yeah, it's I wouldn't refer to it exactly as a process because it's not. I'm very uh, scattered and erratic in my form of in the way that I compose, but there is a boundary I try to work in, which is the boundary of whatever it is that I'm pulling from. So like I don't want to add in things that are extraneous to that, if I can help it.
So just for me to clarify exactly what you're saying, you seem to start with a like a tone or a character or some kind of mood in mind for a piece, or you like extract it from what's already like written down, and you kind of just shape the piece in that direction with the I guess with the decisions that you will make going forward.
More of the former. I don't remember which you said in which order. I think it was the first. I try to start with some kind of image in my head
Hmm.
of a character or a location or something like that. It's really hard for me to write music if I don't have a picture of exactly what's, maybe not even exactly, but roughly what's happening. And so I try to write. Sometimes I'll get music in my head first, and then the
Uh-huh.
picture forms from that, but that's pretty rare. Uh, it's usually the picture first, and a lot of times music will come to my head when I look at certain pictures.
You know, that's really interesting. From 2 points I actually want to make and touch upon. The first one being that I've heard a lot about, from what I've talked to other musicians, it seems like they all kind of get images within their heads, or like of like landscapes, maybe like people like kids playing. I've heard when someone heard like a Jolly track or something like that. For some reason, I don't get anything like that. My experience is like super it's very visceral, I guess you could say. It's very primal. It's kind of just like a sensation that comes up. And when I've tried to write with images or with like scenarios within my head, for some reason, like it just feels like really false and really like I'm kind of like fooling myself. I've known
Yeah.
that I talk about like Daft Punk and everything a lot too because they're the guys that kind of got me into all this. They've said that to like kind of guide their songwriting process, they'll like say like, okay, picture a sunset. We're going down like the highway. What kind of motion comes out from this? I read an interview. But in my own personal composition, I for some reason like I don't experience music that way, and it really makes me wonder like what exactly is going on there.
Yeah.
Another thing too is the second point I wanted to touch upon is this
Can
concept.
I reply to the first bit real quick?
Sure.
I don't think what your experience is uncommon, as far as I can tell. I think it's interesting though that we experience the sort of opposite sensation because, like you said about feeling as though you're forcing it when you're trying to write from the with an image in mind.
Hmm.
I feel that way when I try to write purely based on a more abstract like sensation or
Oh wow.
emotion. So because it's really hard for me to connect that way. It's not that I don't feel those sorts of things when I write, but like I can't work from that strictly abstract place. I have to like see something, you know.
Well, I think
So I
that
think that's interesting that we get the same sort of approach or same sensation from opposite starting
yeah,
points.
absolutely. I have something to say upon that. This is like just like an aside from all this as well. I love these sort of conversations and that like it opens up all these different like branches and pathways. But it's also like so
Yeah.
hard to like touch upon all of them within a good amount of time. So I was like, well, shit.
Right.
Like, which one do I want to follow down now?
Right. Right.
I'll respond to that. What you just said, and this is book I've mentioned a lot, like just around the server and within the community. It's Josh Waitzkin's The Art of Learning. In case you're not familiar with it or him, basically the guy he was a chess prodigy as a kid. Uh, like went to these. I don't know if he went like super duper international, but I know he went to like really high level chess competitions. Like just absolutely swept them. And he also later in life he picked up Tai Chi, like competitive Tai Chi, and he was able to win like pretty big tournaments of them all of it as well. And he said in an interview before, and I think it like opens the book as well, is that it's not that he's good at chess and it's not that he's good at Tai Chi, is that he's good at learning, which is why he wrote his book, The Art of Learning. It's not like as much of a manual of, oh, you know, you can do this, you know, enact this, enact this, enact this, and, you know, you'll become a god. It's more of him just kind of talking about his personal stories, and you can infer some of his process. He
Mm-hmm.
has talked a little bit about it, some of his process. Like he has this idea of form to leave form, where basically you subject yourself to systematizing and deconstructing, you know, exactly what we do with like music theory and all that. And by doing that, you're able to raise your intuition to a higher level.
Hmm.
And with that, you know, you enter form, you systematize, you deconstruct and everything to raise your intuition to a higher level, which is the leaving of form. So you can kind of just pull that stuff out of your bum and, you know, without thinking about it once you get good enough at it. So like he touches upon great stuff like that, but the one thing that came to mind for me when you talked about you know, me and you having like the opposite problem is sort of this thing. It's this idea that I've kind of came up with in reference to the book of letting your taste guide you and letting what resonates with you as a person sort of guide you.
Mm-hmm.
So in the book, he there's this one point where he has two teachers. Now Josh Waitzkin is a very like aggressive chess player, and all of his approaches and how he kind of thought about chess was a reflection of that. You know, kind of like his natural innate just style.
Mm-hmm.
And he had one teacher who like told him, you know, to express himself in this way, to think of chess in this way, because it was natural to him. But there was another teacher who was very defensive, very like camping and turtling, who they both recognized that he kind of had like defensive issues in his
Right.
play. The first one said, learn defense from your knack for offense. And the other said, no, you should learn defense from this sort of turtling, you know, super campy, passive approach. So he
Mm-hmm.
thought, well, okay, you know, if I ought to learn defense, I guess I ought to learn from the most defensive. So that's exactly what he did. He went with his second teacher, who, you know, was kind of like completely against the way that he understood and played chess,
Mm-hmm.
and it just like didn't work out for him. It didn't make sense. It
Right.
felt like it kind of there's like a dissonance between that style and him, and he couldn't make it work.
Yeah, it was hard to incorporate.
Yeah, exactly. But then his the first teacher said, "Hey, you know, you're an aggressive player by nature. You should study matches of historically, you know, aggressive players and how they handled the concept of defense." And when he did that, it was like a light went off in his head, and he
Mm.
was able to integrate defense to a much higher level because he was able to do it in a way that resonated with his taste and style. And you know, kind of tying that all back into, you know, what we just mentioned of, you know, we have kind of opposite problems.
Mm.
I've realized that I kind of need to do the same thing where it doesn't really make much sense for me to try to compose off images, stories, scenarios, and all that thing, because I kind of feel like I'm not being true to myself and the art suffers as a result.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, you know, if I do the opposite where I kind of just go off the sensation of what a track ought to be, then it comes out much nicer. And you know, you just said the same thing where you can't go off pure sensation, but if you go off of, you know, an image, a character, a scenario, you're able to write something much better, right?
Right. Yeah.
So it feels like this sort of thing kind of pervades throughout. I feel like the subject as a whole, because it's kind of the same thing where it's, you know, you've also followed your taste musically. It's like there's a reason why I don't transcribe metal and country music. It's because it's stuff that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't interest me. I don't want to play it. I don't want to write it. I don't really, you know, care about
Yeah.
it because
Yeah.
it's not relevant to me. And in the same sense, you know, country metal musicians aren't transcribing and listening to what I am because it's not relevant to them, and it
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't make any sense.
I guess to summarize what you were saying, it's like you can have the same problem approached that the same problem can be approached in a variety of different ways according to somebody's own style.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Yep.
if they try to, it's not that you shouldn't push yourself outside of your boundaries and your comfort zone, because that's why you're trying to incorporate whatever the new thing is. But if you try to, there are going to be certain ways in which you can access it, and then other ways in which it'll be extremely difficult, if not impossible, for you to access it. Whereas for other people, they're equipped differently. So I'm thinking of like, if say there's a mountain in a game that you're trying to scale, and you have different kinds of characters with different classes and stuff, and they have different gear that's and tools that are available to them. And so the way one player might get up there, it's only going to work for them, and in a way another player might get up there is only going to work for them. But they can still share the same goal, and they can still achieve the same thing. But it's and maybe some will be able to do so easier than others. But
Well,
there's a variety of different ways that can be approached.
yeah, exactly. And I would say, like, it's not like necessarily, the only way it works for them. Like, I get what you're saying, but just to clarify, there's like, I guess, the optimal way and what, resonates with the person. But, if we kind of take this idea and we push it to the extreme, that's kind of like how every individual, composer, pianist, or like instrumentalist, what have you, is that they're an amalgamation of all these little things of taste and experience and, ideas of, what one ought and what ought not to do in their music. And that's how entire pieces and performances are shaped.
Yeah. Like that makes all those tiny little details make up their style to begin with, and also the sort of music that they would write and how they would go about that and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to say, too, something I've also found is that I've tried, very hard to be original in the stuff that I write, especially in the beginning. But kind of an issue I had was that I didn't really know how to write anything good. So it's like, even if I could write stuff that was original, it didn't really matter because it wasn't really going to be anything that anyone wanted to listen to. So once I got into transcribing and everything, I was able to kind of work off the shoulders of giants. There's like that, I think, Isaac Newton saying, where, he didn't like invent all of physics, and the only way he was able to develop physics and like math and all that to the extent that, he was able to develop calculus and gravity was that he was able to work on the work of others before him. And that's a really important idea because it accomplishes so many things. I mean, the first one is that, you're not reinventing the wheel first.
Right.
You're working with the work of others that have already found out like significant stuff. So I don't have to discover, functional harmony all by myself and waste time by doing that, because like, oh, people already laid the groundwork for that and solved it. So I can focus on making my own stuff and my own manipulations with it. It's also important because it guides your taste. Why do we get into music in the first place? It's not to be like, we didn't not come from anything, or I don't even know how many double, triple, quadruple negatives I used there. But, we came from somewhere, basically. We came from somewhere, and that's what got us into music in the first place. And we ought to follow that avenue and that route because that's part of who we are, that's part of what resonated with us as people to get us into music in the first place. And we ought to continue down that path because it's the path that we came from in the first place. Okay, so follow your taste. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Those are like the two biggest things, honestly, for... Oh yeah, then there was like the whole thing about being original. I found that just by trying to express myself like as truly as I could, taking upon all the different things that I've realized that I really loved, just by transcribing, I was able to actually articulate and figure out what it was that I liked, even stuff since I was a kid. Like I remember my brother was playing Final Fantasy, and I heard that I think it's like the habanera melody from Bizet's opera Carmen, the ba ba da 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 da
Uh-huh.
ba da 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 da. I heard that and I was like, oh my god, that's amazing. Even as like a little like 5-year-old, I didn't find the melody until I was like 14.
Hmm.
And then a couple of years later, I transcribed it, and I was like, "Oh, this is so cool because it has." The reason I like this is because the reason why I like everything else is a mixture of duples and triplets,
Hmm.
uh, cool chromatic notes, and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I had a similar experience when I was young. I I was at my cousin's house when I think I was 7 years old, and he had a Sega Genesis, and he was playing Sonic 2 on it, and that was my first introduction to Sonic. And
Uh huh.
I heard he got to Chemical Plant Zone, and I heard the music for the first time, and I was like, "Oh my goodness!" And
Mm-hmm.
I distinctly remember thinking to myself, "I never want to forget this song." And about I don't know 7 or 8 years later, I remembered it randomly, and I was like, I'm gonna track this thing down. And so I knew it was from a Sonic game, so I started looking through Sonic music, and I found I was looking. I think it was John Week's MIDI files that I was looking through, and I finally came across it. And yeah, I didn't have the musical experience at the time to like transcribe it or anything, but
Yeah,
I
but
kept
something
tabs on
something
that kind of
like
stuff since
yeah,
then.
absolutely. No, that's the funny thing. I've talked with Christina about this sort of thing a lot. There's this book that he recommended me called Mastery by Robert Greene.
Hmm.
And like the whole premise of the book is kind of to deconstruct like masters in different fields and kind of like charting out what led to them becoming so good at what they do
Hmm.
and how we can learn from it. And there's this portion of the book that talks about how like a bunch of these big names that we're all familiar with, like Charles Darwin. That's the only one I remember at the time, but big famous names and
Right.
how they kind of well, they all had instances in childhood that foreshadowed the path on which they were going to go upon. So Charles Darwin, he would like go out into the garden and just like play with insects and observe plants and just watch. And
Hmm.
he kind of just studied as much as a little kid could. Then there was also some artist, I forget which one it was, but he would go into his dad's office and steal paper, which at the time was actually like really
Hmm.
expensive. So it was actually kind of like very mischievous for him to
Yeah.
do. He would steal paper and he would go out to wherever and just start like drawing the natural landscapes and everything
Hmm.
within it. I kind of noticed. I have my own story as well, where it kind of comes in a few different instances. But the first one, like I said before, Daft Punk is kind of what got me into all of this.
Yeah.
It's why I'm here right now. Is thanks to them. I remember when I was 8 years old, my sister was dating this guy at the time, and he was over and had his laptop up, and he played Daft Punk song "Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger." And before then, like I just, I played, or no, I guess I'm getting my timeline mixed up. Anyways, I'll touch on that in a minute. He played that song. It like blew me away, but for whatever reason, I never really thought to kind of go back to it.
Hmm.
But I also, in like middle school and everything, I played saxophone. I tried picking up piano for a little bit and drums. Nothing clicked with me, and I didn't even really know like why I kind of got into it. I guess I found the idea of playing an instrument cool,
Hmm.
but I couldn't really think of any music that I liked. My brothers were both guitarists, and the one loves the Beatles, Led Zeppelin, The Doors, basically all that '60s rock, and then my others like in the punk and grunge and all that.
Hmm.
And so I was kind of surrounded by that sort of music, stuff on the radio and everything too. I couldn't get into it. I didn't really get where the appeal was. I thought I just didn't like music as a whole.
Yeah.
But I went online and I saw it was like big news that Daft Punk was releasing this new album, which would later be Random Access Memories. This would have been about when I was maybe 14 or 15. I remember I was in my last year of middle school, and I was like, oh, I remember Daft Punk from that one song that Max, my sister's ex-boyfriend, played. I should it'd be kind of cool to like check them out and see what's going on. There was a teaser that sounded really, really cool. So I was like, oh, okay, that's actually kind of, that's really interesting. And I remember like I loved the song Harder, Better, Faster, Stronger. So I was like, you know what, I should probably listen to the full album of that, just in anticipation of their new record. And that was like a life-changing day.
Mm-hmm.
I basically separate my life between that album,
Before Daft
Discovery.
Punk and after that, or that,
Yeah,
whatever that particular
yeah,
album was.
yeah. Before Discovery and after
Uh-huh.
Discovery, because I was like, oh my God, something is here. I don't know what the hell it is, but I realized that this is very, very important.
Yeah.
And then I was delving into it, and I got like obsessed with it. I was like, oh my God, this music's amazing. How have I not heard anything like this before?
Mm-hmm.
And then, I kind of realized going back to it, a lot of the music that I listened to in terms of video games were kind of a similar thing, because they both have that sort of funk sound, this sort of like instance of melody philosophy. Of course, I couldn't have told you that really at the time, just 'cause
Right.
I didn't really know how to articulate my musical ideas. But I realized this link, so I was like, okay, so video game music is also pretty cool. And then I spent like maybe a year trying to find Daft Punk's actual influences, because they don't really ever talk about them. Not that side of it, because they'll cite stuff like some 70s groups, 70 rock groups like
The more
10cc.
direct influences.
Not I wouldn't even say that. Like, it's like one shade of influence that it's like there's not really much mystery to it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like if they reveal it, it's like, oh, okay, that's it's kind of like
Not
whatever.
surprising.
Yeah, but then there's some where it's like that are actually a really big aspect of their sound, and either they thought they ought to not mention them, or they weren't worth mentioning. I don't really know why,
Mm-hmm.
but one of those big ones that took me like a year to find out, and I absolutely loved it when I did, is Yellow Magic Orchestra, which
Mm-hmm.
is they have a really, really big influence on, I guess, just like anything kind of derived from funk, disco, pop music from the 70s and onwards.
Mm-hmm. I've
Especially,
heard many, many game composers list them as an influence as well.
yeah, like you can't. I could probably name more game composers that were influenced by YMO than game composers that weren't influenced by YMO. If we're talking like Japanese,
Yeah. Yeah.
uh,
Even Jun Sonoe, who's like, if for those of you who aren't familiar with him, he's a composer for the Sonic series. He almost exclusively does rock music. YMO would be the last influence I'd expect from him, but he lists them as an influence as well.
yeah, it's really crazy how it just pervades the entirety of like the Japanese musical scene, and it's the same thing with like those sort of, I guess those French dance artists too, and I guess a lot of electronic and techno and all that sort of thing. Those sort of artists as well. I was reading how YMO even influenced, like, I don't know if it was, I think it was hip hop, yeah, because there was a big techno scene in Detroit, in the 20th century. It's I don't
Mm-hmm.
really know too much about it, just because it's not really, I don't really care for techno music or anything like that. But I
Mm-hmm.
read that YMO was really big in the techno and I think even hip hop scenes of the time, and like something as far reaching as Detroit. I grew up in Michigan. I was only about 40 minutes from Detroit, and from all the people I associated with from there, like YMO is not the one group that I would expect for them all to listen to.
Mm.
And the same thing with or like all the like local rappers and everything too, but I guess you kind of get a sense of I could see how they also have that tie-in with like the sampling philosophy of hip hop also existing in like house music and all that. Um,
Right.
but kind of steering it back to video games. Uh, yeah, I guess I was just kind of like it was so cool to find out about YMO, because I was able to find this common root between the style that I absolutely loved, that got me into everything in the first place with Daft Punk. But then like going back to this music that I really liked as a kid from video games, which was like really
Mm-hmm.
the one music that I really liked. and just seeing how they kind of had this common thread to them.
So that, I guess I'm thinking of about how we were talking about how every individual composer and artist has their particular tastes and interests, and that's going to shape the work that they make and how they go about that exactly, and what's going to be most optimal for them
Yeah.
versus somebody else. But that also can be traced back through other generations of artists because although we all are individuals, we're also similar to one another because we're not completely separate from one another.
Oh, absolutely. Well, the
And
thing,
so, as a result, like, there will be some links between the sorts of the manner of work and the process of it that one artist does and somebody who's influenced by them does.
so are you more so talking about how? I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around exactly what you said. So
Sorry.
that's all good. Are you talking about how there could be a shared process like between someone and their influences? Like they could have like reverse engineered the songwriting process of them, or do you just mean that there's like this line of taste that goes throughout history?
More the latter.
Okay.
Like, there's the sorts of people and the ways that they work who were drawn to a particular type of art or music or whatever, I would assume to be more. It would be likely that there would also be other people who are similar to them
Oh,
who share that kind of style.
absolutely. You know what? This is something I've been kind of thinking about lately. Is that with these sort of genres like metal and, well, I guess most obviously like metal, goth, and all that sort of stuff, like goth rock and all, there's that fashion aspect to it too. And, they always, all black, dyed hair, the eyeliner on both like girls and guys, painting nails and all that sort of things. And I thought it was interesting and that there's these sort of extra musical aspects of taste, if you will, that correspond to the music itself, which kind of says a lot about taste as a whole. I think because it's not just limited to like the sound that you listen to. For some people, it also extends to the way they dress, some of the philosophy they adhere to, and so on.
You mentioned originality in the process of writing music and how you were striving to be true to yourself in
Oh yeah.
what you write. And so now when I was growing up, I heard that phrase like be true to yourself all the time. And I never understood what that meant. And so because it's like on the surface of it, it seems relatively unambiguous, but like the moment you try to explain what it means, like I always came up at a loss.
Do you mean
And
in terms of music or also in general? Because there's a lot to say about
in
both.
general,
Okay.
both. But like I think I've begun to get a little closer to understanding it. And it goes back to what I was saying before about how I feel subservient to art when I write. There's a quote by, so C.S. Lewis was an author and theologian, and he, in his book Mere Christianity, there's he's talking about originality in general, and I think that was nested inside a larger conversation. I don't remember exactly. It's been a
Uh-huh.
while since I've read it, but looking at the quote itself, he said, "Even in literature and art, no man who bothers about originality will ever be original. Whereas if you simply try to tell the truth without caring twopence how often it's been told before, you will 9 times out of 10 become original without ever having noticed it. And when I first saw that, I read that I didn't quite understand what he meant by it. But I mean, again, on the surface, it makes sense. But when I tried to inspect it, it's like, okay, how do I apply that? What does that mean? Like from a practical perspective, how do I do that? I didn't know how to approach it, and this is really something that I've only begun to sort of and I'm not saying that I've got it figured out or anything like that, but
Yeah.
it's something that I've begun to process over the past 2 years, I guess, and 2 or 3 years, and I've, at least consciously, I've noticed that when I write, so I guess I'll give a specific example.
Sure.
I was writing a character theme. It ended up being, I finished it. It's called Ranunculatiae, Reverie of a Child, and it's on my album Memories of Summer. And it was written for a character who is very reserved, and she's very aloof. She's very she's got a very rich inner world, and she feels things very deeply, but she
doesn't express it on the outside.
Right. She doesn't express it on the outside,
Okay.
and also she's very sensitive to stimuli, so she gets overwhelmed easily. And so her expressions of those things are going to be a little more low-key as well.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to represent that musically, because it was her theme. And I had written the intro. It was one of those situations where it ended up being a sort of linear songwriting process. And I'd written the intro, and I wanted to develop that theme and add in more instruments and things. And everything in me wanted to go for this sweeping string section in the development. And I tried doing that a couple of times, but it just felt wrong. You know, I got something about it felt, because there's this sensation that I get when to give another example, I used to, this is going to sound completely unrelated, but
It's all good.
Maybe it'll make sense. I used to, when I would talk about chord function in music theory discussions, there's this idea that chords generally fall into one of three functions: tonic, subdominant, or dominant functions. And it's within diatonic systems, it's usually quite clear where those fall, but outside of that, it's not obvious how to approach that. And so I was looking at the flat 7 chord, the subtonic chord in major keys, and I was like, okay, what function does that serve? Is it a subdominant chord, or is it a dominant chord? And does that depend on the context, or is it a singular function that can be applied that's in between two or something like that? Or
Yeah.
does it fall within the boundaries of one or the other? Anyways, I was asking myself those questions, and I used to talk about it as being one or the other, depending on the context. But I didn't feel that I could back that up exactly. I didn't feel confident in saying that. And so I would talk about it as though I was confident in that idea. But on the inside, I felt whenever I would say that, I would feel uncomfortable, because I'd be like, I don't fully.
Because you didn't have
believe
that foundation. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And it's not that I don't think it was a bad idea to I think it was a perfectly valid suggestion, but at least I said it as though it was something that I felt was true when I was actually like more like 70% on it, 60% on it than I
Mm-hmm.
was, closer to 100, and probably less than that really. And so I stopped saying it. And if it ever came up again, I would speak in more,
General
I don't
terms.
want to say hasn't. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So like I would say, here's a way of thinking about it. I'm not sure if that's the way of thinking about it or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And so that feeling went away when I started talking about it more. And so I think that traces back to the idea of honesty. And so like because I was saying something that it's not that the thing that I was saying was necessarily untrue, but I was saying it as though I thought it was true when in reality
It
I
wasn't. Yeah.
wasn't certain. And so within me there was a dissonance in between reality and what I was saying. And to me that represents dishonesty. And so like that
So it was
I'm
like
very
almost a,
sensitive to that sort of
yeah, it was
thing. So
almost a moral dilemma in a way.
right, exactly. And so that feeling when I was trying to write this song and I kept trying to go for like these sweeping string sections, I had that same feeling. And when so I had to take a step back and I thought about the character and I'm like, okay, well, this is too much for her. This would overwhelm her. And so I need to like dial this back. And so it took me a while, but I eventually, and it's an extremely delicate arrangement, and it took me a long time of trial and error to get it right.
Mm-hmm.
But I I dialed it back, and eventually got it to the point where I no longer felt that internal dissonance,
Oh,
and
good.
I was able to continue and represent her as well as I could have at the time, I think. And it's I've felt that I've continued to notice that feeling come up when I write music, and whenever I heed it and I make the necessary adjustments to make that feeling go away, my music always, always, always turns out better than it would have
Oh,
otherwise.
absolutely. I've done the same thing. I feel like there's like two different flavors of that I kind of want to touch upon.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is, sort of like what you said, where is this in line with the character of the track? Is this in line with the tone and mood that I want to convey? Because I've
Mm-hmm.
written stuff that are, I could write a B section. I could write a million B sections that work for this A section, all day long. But
Mm-hmm.
mechanically speaking, and then there's also the intent of, okay, but what about staying true to the sensation that I have in mind? That's a completely different question. It's what you just talked about as well. So, it's something I've come across a lot as well. The second one is, I just mentioned that I could write stuff that is mechanically right, but then there's also the aspect of, okay, well, what if something, kind of, it's true to the character, but it also like mechanically doesn't really work as well. Like maybe,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's frustrating.
yeah, absolutely. Those are two things that have been like honing with myself on, just improving my ability on. For the first,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of tricky for me in a way because I don't really have, like you said, you kind of have like an image or a
Mm-hmm.
or a character or a scenario to go off of. Whereas for me, it's kind of just this like visceral sensation. So
Right. So it's harder to like
it's harder to,
talk about it.
yeah, it's harder to kind of shed a light on it and to find out its form and its boundaries and everything. I have to do a lot of exploring
Yeah.
in order to uncover
Yeah.
that. Uh,
Yeah. That's my biggest like blockade when I'm trying to write music in that sense, or if I in the rare situations where I am inspired by a more abstract sensation. Like
Hmm.
that's definitely my biggest stumbling block.
Oh, you know what? So we were talking like a million minutes ago how I had a point two, that I wanted to touch upon, but I forgot what it was. It just came back to me, and it ties into this as well.
Okay.
So I know this guy, Robin Harn. He is a tournament runner for competitive Smash Bros. I was really into it when I was like 14. And I went up to him one day and I asked him, like, how do you put these events together? Because he would have like 2,000 people coming to the annual event in Michigan every year. He'd have people coming from the Netherlands, Japan, Australia, all
Wow.
around the U.S., like everywhere. So it was a really, really big logistics sort of thing. And he's also a mechanical engineer, a systems engineer. So it's like, as far as I know, like his job is perfectly suited for this hobby of running tournaments. So I went up to him one day and I was like, how exactly like do you manage all this? Because I was really interested in like kind of the composition of the event and wondering if there's any sort of wisdom to kind of extract for myself. And he said, the most important thing, what I do when I plan this sort of stuff out, is that I start with the end goal. I start with the end, and then I work my way back, and I think, how do I get here? And from doing that, he traces back. He's able to trace back to step one, and then he has his whole entire route planned out for him. And I realized that the same thing kind of applies to cooking in a way, because whenever I want to cook something for dinner, I don't just I have something in mind. I have limitations that I keep putting on myself until I reach an angle that I want to reach, and then I can then go forward. So it's like, okay, well, what am I feeling tonight? Okay, Italian. Well, what sounds good Italian wise? Spaghetti and meatballs. Okay, perfect. I have a clear end goal, and now I can go forward. Whereas on the opposite side of things, say I don't have a clearly defined path. I'm just throwing stuff in a bowl. I don't know what the hell is gonna result from it, and it's a very good chance I'm gonna get something that's kind of absolutely disgusting. Worst case scenario, like I'm throwing hot sauce and ice cream and watermelon in, and it's not a good
There's got to be
time.
somebody out there who enjoys that.
Yeah, unfortunately, but that's like the worst case scenario. And then it goes, but it doesn't really have to be that extreme. It can also be that I don't really have a clear plan, so I'm just gonna like toss in all this stuff together, with kind of a general idea. And it's like, okay, I actually get a spaghetti dinner that will, like, say I didn't plan on making spaghetti, but it's like, oh shoot, something spaghetti-esque just like turned out. You can eat it for dinner, it's fine. But I didn't really have a clear end goal in mind. So this is also an idea that I've been kind of exploring a lot. Is this idea of like palatability, and this is going into like so many different, like you said, the rabbit holes. But so like
Yeah.
I've realized that like there's kind of there's like a continuum for all this stuff. So the worst case scenario is that I throw in just all this disgusting, unrelated food. The unrelatedness is what makes them disgusting, into a bowl and just like go forward. It's like, okay, well, I get something that no one wants to eat. Well, there's also a step higher from that. I don't really have a clear goal in mind, but I can throw stuff in a bowl and it's like, okay, I make a pretty decent dinner. It's palatable. But if I have something, if I have a plan, I have an end goal in mind, I have a very well devised plan on how to get to it, i.e. a recipe, then I could probably make, with the right skill, a Michelin star meal. And I thought the same thing, in terms of music too. It's like, if I just start throwing all these unrelated rhythms and melodic fragments and all this sort of stuff, it's like I just put in hot sauce, watermelon and ice cream into the same bowl. It's absolutely disgusting.
It's too chaotic.
Yeah, exactly. But then if I, and then with like a lot of amateur composers that are like, they're not like completely clueless, but, or like even like the pop music that I've heard from the 70s and stuff, some of the stuff that I even like, it's like, okay, this is very palatable. I don't mind listening to it, but it's not as good as it possibly could be. Like, perhaps there's like some of our process here like, okay, they have some experience songwriting and everything, but maybe they didn't think their composition over too well, or maybe they just don't really have the skill to realize it to a very high level. And then, of course, you get like these grand works of architecture from classical music where it's like this autonomous web of relationship, and everything reinforces itself. You can get the end from the beginning and vice versa. It's like this autonomous whole that's interconnected on like all possible levels. And I forget how I even got to here, as I'm talking, but I realized just how important that sort of level of preparation, I guess, in a sense, can be.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like as if I went off on a little bit of a tangent,
That's
but
fine. I
yeah,
mean, that's what this podcast is for.
I was gonna say like this is like I feel like this is really really important in terms of writing music and everything is, uh, if you really want to write something that is like absolutely amazing, it needs to have a process, it needs to have a plan, it needs to have some sort of structure, because otherwise you
Mm-hmm.
just risk it being like merely palatable.
Mm-hmm. I I want to. I don't know if challenge is the right word, uh, but discuss that idea of, well, a plan or a structure that goes into, because it's like I think a lot of okay, well, so I'm not going to say that like any of my music is particularly good or anything, but
Hmm.
like when I write, I do it very erratically and very like it's very spontaneous, and I I don't go in with a plan at all, because and
Hmm.
that's part of I not to knock people who do, but I mean I think Chris has talked about Chrisana has talked about classical form in the past and mentioned how like the one of the primary appeals of it is that you can start with a boundary within which to work, and then you can go nuts inside of it,
Yeah.
and like you'll be reasonably well contained that you can play with things safely in a safe environment, which is great. But and there's also a game that you can play. Well, I'll remind me to get back to that because I want to bring that up later.
Okay.
But that idea of games, and so anyways, so like my process, for instance, I just due to the way that I try to work, I said that I'm like I try to be. I don't feel as though I'm concocting anything myself. I'm taking from what already exists, and I'm just trying to chronicle it as best as I can,
Yeah.
and represent it as well as I can. And so like I feel like I'm searching for something. I feel like I'm say like a researcher who's like out in a field and trying to catch a glimpse of some rare creature and trying to draw it and write down its attributes, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And so, and I'm trying to put as little of my own interpretation into that as possible because I wanted it to be accurate. And so, as a result of that, I don't go in with any idea of I want it to be this sort of form or this or to have this ensemble of instruments or whatever. Like all of that comes like I'll have say I have like a chamber orchestra or something,
Hmm.
and then I throw in like a synth for like one bar. Like that's a little weird or whatever, but if I were to do that, it would be purely in service of whatever it is that I'm trying to represent. And so,
Yeah,
like for
absolutely.
example, I would sometimes my arrangements are criticized for being I will give instruments. Well, the the joke about the triangle player who plays like three notes in an entire piece, uh, that extends to all of the instruments. So, for
Yeah.
example, I've got a song that has a bassoon in it, where like I think it only plays one note for the entire piece. It's
Is
like right at the
is
end,
it that like that
and
German concept, the Klagenfarben or like sound color
uh,
melody?
not not quite. That's I forget the name of the term, but I know what you're referring to. It's a form of composition where the melody is kind of passed along different instruments.
Okay.
But but I'll use so like I've been told, like if you have a piece like that, it's like you have the bassoonist on stage and they're just going to be sitting there the entire piece to play one note at the end, and I'm like, yes, because that's their
Yeah,
job.
that's what the piece
And
needs.
yeah, that's what the piece needs. It's like it doesn't matter, like I mean, all empathy to them, but it doesn't matter whether or not that's fun. It's like to sit there the whole time, like that's their role, and so as a result, like to bring it back to the point, I don't go in with a form. However, I do. It's not that the form is decided at the start.
Yeah.
It's that the form is I meld what I have into a form that can be intelligible, and that's the important part, because it's like I have a lot of elements that make up the thing that I'm trying to represent, but then I have to represent it, and I have to make it intelligible and understandable by
Yeah, absolutely.
people who listen to it. And so that's where the form comes in. And I don't start with that, but like I get the elements there, and then I go back through it and comb through it and refine it. And so like I'll add everything that I think is applicable. That's the wrong word, but it's close enough. And then I'll go back through it and remove everything that's not essential.
Yeah, no, that
And
absolutely makes sense. With me, with my big tirade a minute ago about, you know, starting out from the, planning from the end, like a master composer and everything. Well, first, like I'm assuming that that's how master composers work. I've apparently, like what Alan Belkin has said is that it doesn't really seem as if master composers really do have done that, which is kind of funny because that's what Schoenberg says in his Fundamentals of Musical Composition book, that ideally, like, composers are able to envision a piece in spontaneous vision. But then Al Balkin says, well, no, instead you sketch, revise, sketch, revise, sketch, revise, sketch, revise, and you just like do that a million times until you get your final piece. I mean, I think it's an ideal, of course, to
envision it before you start.
yeah, have this spontaneous
Yeah, that'd be
envision.
great.
Yeah, I definitely think that, even though it's like idealistic to, do that for something like a huge, huge, huge work, I don't think it's a bad thing to strive for, because, obviously there's going to be skills picked up from doing that that's going to help such a thing. So I can't really speak on the complete reality of it, but I've known that I have tried to do this myself to extents. I've taken, I'll like lay out, I'll take a sheet of paper and I'll kind of, write out the character or the mood or kind of like aspects of the sensation, if I could, whatever I can kind of get from it, whatever sort of lights I can shine on it to understand its character. And then I'll write like different harmonies and I'll basically get different building blocks of music, and then I try to structure them around, like, okay, will this be most effective here? Will this be most effective there? And as I do that, the piece kind of clarifies itself more and more and more, and everything starts to fall into place. But even then, like, there's still this idea of like starting from something and working back from it in a way. There's that sensation in which I can, the entire piece is going to, kind of manifest this, so we can assume that, the whole piece is going to be the end in a sense, because that's what we arrive at.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the creative process ends with this, sensation, but also begins with it. And as for I guess in your case, it ends and starts with this sort of character scenario, what have you.
It Now that you say it like that, I guess that's how I write characters. I'll start with the result. I'll start with like what I envision them to be, and then I work backwards. So like
Mm-hmm.
I have this idea of a character, and I'm like, okay, I look at every aspect of their personality, and at least like the from the it's not going to be very well developed immediately, but just on the surface, I look at aspects of their personality and the way that they dress and the way that they just little things like that, and ask myself, okay, why are they like that? And I work
Mm-hmm.
backwards from there, and that develops something more complete.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's also a really good way to work in that, some features are more important and more characteristic than others. And if someone can identify these most characteristic features, like kind of in their most pure form, they can like work. I guess it would be kind of like working back, or maybe even fleshing out with ornamentation to like make them, a whole, rather than just making them like this pure mass of two strong concentrated forces.
Yeah.
If you go, so I feel like that could be like a really good way to approach and think about it as well. Because with those like characters, I don't really know much. And it seems that you're talking about like literary
Yeah,
characters.
yeah.
I don't really know much in that domain, but as far as music goes, I know like in sections, there's very salient and characteristic and important moments, and that's kind of like that's what makes you go wow. That's what makes you like this. That's what makes you like the song, but it also needs like these more subservient secondary, not as interesting, but that doesn't mean that it's not interesting.
Right.
Not as jumping out aspects to them in order just to balance those more popping features
Right. Because if you have
and
too much
to
of that,
enrich the work
like
as a whole.
you don't, the impact of them isn't as much if you
It's not
don't
as
have the
strong. Yeah,
context that they're put
there
in.
needs to there needs to be there needs to be contrast to it.
Right.
It's like, well, like the way I've thought about it, and this is something we talked about on the server a lot too, is that contrast is so important to composition. With everything, like this is something that I've realized just in my daily life. I could touch upon it in like all different mediums of composition. Like of course music, that's what we're most familiar with. But in terms of dress, like in terms of fashion, like what's the most basic contrast you can possibly think of? Well, I would say like color against, your skin tone. There's a reason why we don't dress, in our skin tones for an entire outfit. First off, it makes us look naked and we could get charged for public indecency if we're not careful. Or at least we'd get approached by a cop who would try to do that until we explain ourselves. Second is, okay, well, you have colors that kind of contrast your skin tone. So, well, what if I wear an outfit of like all red? It's like, okay, well, that's way too much continuity and, in the whole outfit, like the pants and the shirt kind of get lost within each other. Whereas if I like change the color of, maybe my pants are black, it's like, okay, well, the different color of the pants and the shirt, they clarify each other. They also work off of each other. And like the colors that I choose to contrast each other with also depends. So it's like if I choose blue pants and an orange shirt, which are by their nature, they're very strong contrasting colors, just due to like how human psychology and color theory and all that works. That's gonna have a much more stark effect than if I have like white and pink, like a white shirt, pink shirt,
Right.
just because they have a much gentler relationship than like blue and orange. Oh, I was talking to my brother too because he's a writer. He's a published author, and I was going through the concept of how important contrast is, and I said something like, have you ever noticed that you've never seen a bread sandwich on the menu at a restaurant? Do you want to know why? It's just because it's just a loaf of bread. The contrast is so important to a sandwich that it makes a sandwich.
Right.
There's a such thing as a toast sandwich even. It has a Wikipedia page where you have a piece of toast within two things of bread, but there's no bread sandwich.
That's that actually. Why does that make sense? I mean, I know why it does. That's yeah, yeah. Because like toast is a completely different consistency than untoasted bread.
Yeah, exactly. There's that contrast of texture.
Right. And that's enough make it.
To make it
Yeah.
like a dish, to make it interesting, yeah.
There's a diagram.
Well, it's the same thing.
Oh, go ahead. I was gonna say like there's a diagram of like the what's it called, like the good, like awful, not awful, lawful good, lawful bad.
Oh yeah, I know what you're
an
talking about.
alliances chart. There's one for like sandwiches, and it's like what counts as a sandwich. And there's I think it's like the chaotic evil part where it's like a Pop-Tart's a sandwich.
Oh my god.
It's like how far do
This
you
should.
extend the definition and how far do you restrict it? But
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
that's a very good question for any sort of definition. But I'm getting into semantics there. So continue what you were saying.
Well, that's the thing too. I've heard of such things with like yeah, I've heard of a
Is a
bunch of
taco
different
a
sandwich
sandwich?
debates. Is taco? Oh, I never heard that one. That's a good one. Well, I was gonna say I've heard like is a hot dog a
Yeah,
sandwich?
taco's the next
Is it or
next step up from there.
and then it's like is a Oreo a sandwich? So it
Well, they
seems
are
like
sandwich cookies. That's what they
yeah,
call
exactly.
them.
I would say it's a sandwich. So it kind of seems like our definition of a sandwich is that you have these two. You have like something in the center that is contrasted by two things that are also the same on either side.
Right, like
Yeah,
bookends.
yeah, exactly.
Is a book.
So bullshit. Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's a bookshelf sandwich. Oh, that's amazing. We gotta make that one. Good. We should just open like a comedy duo, dude.
Yeah.
But so yeah, it's a bookshelf sandwich. Exactly. So well, then there's also like the stipulation that it has to be edible.
Well, that's
So
true.
so unfortunately for us, I think the answer to that is no. Yeah, contrast is so important. Just like for everything in life, the way that we eat is marked by contrast. The way that we speak about things is marked by contrast. We have contrasting words.
Like how you raised in your voice and pitch when you said speak.
Yeah, I mean, you can find it like everywhere, like all sorts of little things. If I ask yeah, like that, like my vocal intonation can go up or it can go down. That's a boy, that's a girl. There's like so many things that I could touch upon that it's hard to even think of them. I have my backpack sitting over here, and then I have a trash can right next to it. Very different aspects to both of their existences, which clarifies why that is my backpack and why that is a trash can.
Yeah, you could technically put anything in either of them, but like they have different purposes, and the way that they're built signifies that.
Yeah, exactly. It's like no one's gonna accidentally throw plate into my backpack because its innate characteristics are so different from what we think of what a trash can ought to be. No,
Even if they've never seen a backpack like that before. Or
yeah,
something.
exactly. That also goes into the idea of like archetypes of. I think I told you before. I posted this message to you of this idea of. I think it was like Plato's shadow of the caves allegory. I don't really know like the official interpretation of it, but basically how the story goes is that, from what philosophy students have told me, is that we're all just You know what? I'm actually going to abandon this point of thought because I'm not well versed in philosophy enough to kind of touch upon it. But
Okay,
anyways,
I guess I'll summarize it, like the
sure.
story, just so people can like. I don't remember what book it's from. Isn't it from the Republic?
Yeah, as far as I know.
Yeah, there's a like the idea roughly is that you have people who are tied to a wall, like in a cave, and
This is
or well, not tied to a wall, but like they're tied
yeah.
down,
They're like
sitting in a cave,
they're changed to a wall.
looking toward looking towards a wall, and they're restrained in such a manner that they can't turn their heads or see anything aside from what they're directly staring at. They know that there's other people in the that they exist with, but the only thing that they can do, and like just pretend that they somehow managed to survive for years doing this. So the only thing that they can see is like directly ahead of them. They see on this cave wall shadows of things that pass by. There's a probably important to mention. There's a
Yeah.
fire right behind them. So but the only thing that they can see ahead of them is like these shadows that pass by. And the reason for those shadows is because people are walking behind them where this fire is, holding objects, and the shadows of those objects cast onto the cave wall. But as far as these people who are restrained know, those shadows are the things. They don't realize that those shadows are actually very low resolution representations of things like that are being casted by these other objects that they can't even comprehend because they've never seen them before. And so like the idea is like one person manages to break free and sees the cause of these shadows, and it completely breaks his perception of reality, and it takes him a long time to come to terms with that, and then he tries to explain it to the others, and they think he's crazy, and really reasonably so. And so he was relating that back to philosophy as a whole, like this is a extremely truncated summary of it, and I'm but
It's
like the general picture should come
yeah.
across, like that when people come closer to understanding the true nature of things, like it's just such a vast thing that it's almost impossible to comprehend to begin with. And even if you can, like trying to communicate that to other people is even more impossible.
I think there's like, then again, I'm not like really well read in philosophy at all, so I don't know if I'm butchering like official interpretations or whatever may have
Same,
you,
yeah,
but
yeah,
also
yeah.
good.
Take all of this as like just read it for yourself
Yeah, exactly.
if you
But I wanted to also like kind of tie it into the concept of like archetypes, where you know what you were saying before of how people can understand that my backpack is not a garbage can even if they might have not have seen my backpack before. It's like, okay, well then what makes up the essence of a backpack? How can I differentiate a backpack from a garbage can or from anything else for that matter? And it kind of raises an interesting question, because then and like avenue questions, because it's like, okay, well then what's like the intrinsic aspects of a backpack? How can I reverse engineer what a backpack is, so that, say, if I'm a backpack maker, I can make like I can kind of take that base and expand it outwards and make all sorts of crazy backpacks that still work and everything. At least
yeah.
that's kind of how I've taken it with writing and everything. I've been approaching like musical concepts in like very like seemingly simple ones at first, and wondering, okay, like, well, where exactly is the heart of this thing, you know, and where does it, and like how does it relate to all other like aspects of music? There's that contrasting aspect where, of course, rhythm and intervals are very different from each other, but as you kind of like start exploring them more and more and more, you start to see that they can affect, they have implications on one another.
Right.
Something, you know what I was about to say, because I do want to delve into this. You mentioned before something about games, and you wanted to bring
Yes,
it up.
yeah,
Was this going to be
exactly.
about the Masuda?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I was thinking about that again, and I wanted to bring it up. So, Junichi Masuda, who is he was the composer for Pokemon Red and Blue, and he's written music for a lot of the Pokemon games since. He's probably better known now as the director for a lot of the Pokemon games in the series. I believe he's directing Sword and Shield. I may be wrong about that. If not that, he's in a producer level or something high up there. He's overseeing
He's
things.
always involved, it seems.
He's always involved to some degree, and he's got a blog which I think is abandoned now. Maybe he moved to a different blog service, but I've been reading through it, and he's just like, there's this one post that he made where he was talking about one of the ways that he tries to come up with ideas, and he brought up he opened it with a quote by Pablo Picasso, where he said, "I do not seek, I find." And the idea was that, like, when he approaches, or at least some of the times that he approaches ideas for games, he doesn't try to seek for anything in particular because well, he doesn't know what he would look for in the first place. He instead talked about trying to kind of like just foray out into the void and find whatever comes to him. But there's like, it's hard to do that if you don't have a way of systemizing that, I guess.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
the way that he, because it's like you grope out into nothingness, and like how are you going to extract anything from that? And so his suggestion was to try to play games with things, and it was a very abstract example, and he didn't give any like practical uses for it, probably on purpose, but he brought up the idea of a piece of paper with lots of circles drawn on it. And so you'd have like red circles and blue circles and circles of different sizes and that were different, spaced differently from one another, and some maybe more clustered in one area than another. And he said, like, okay, so you take that piece of paper and it's interesting to look at, but like you can't, it's hard to gain anything just from that. So like, okay, try to create a series of rules and then play within those. And so he was like, maybe you can set a timer and say, in the next 20 seconds or whatever, find as many blue circles as you can, or find as many circles of a particular size as you can in that allotted time, or whatever. And the examples ranged from being very simple to more complex. And he said, it's just a way of streamlining the process of looking for patterns in things. And he said to try that and see what you find, and try that in different areas, in different different situations, and see what you can come up with. And so, I decided to try that consciously when I was working with I was trying to understand the role of the tritone in the major scale and in music as a whole and its resolutions. And so I decided to look at all the different ways that it could resolve, and I'm not going to go into that now because that's not really the focus of this conversation. But I came up with a series of rules for myself, and I made more or less had justifications for those, and then I just played a game with that, and I tried to see, and I gave it a scoring system and stuff, and I ended up discovering something that really advanced my understanding of tonicization and of the nature of tritones and scales just from that exercise.
No, I'm really curious about what your process was, like how you devise these rules and everything.
Yeah, I'll explain it to you some other time.
Sounds
But
good.
you were gonna say something?
Oh, I kind of have my own process because this is something I've been thinking about so much. Is how important process is for everything. Like I said with cooking, you can't throw stuff in a bowl, go forward, and expect a Michelin star meal. So I apply processes to when I compose, but then there's also aspects of music that I've wanted to learn about that I didn't really know much about, and I didn't even know how to approach them. But I was reminded back to this book I'd read when I was like 14 or so by this physicist named Richard Feynman, who was a big name in physics. He essentially like created his own field of physics, quantum electrodynamics, and he wrote this book called "Surely You're Joking, Mr. Feynman," which kind of just talks about various personal anecdotes and some about like the ways he approaches learning and everything, because he was also a teacher at, I think it was Caltech, some large university, very important. But he has this idea, he has this process for deriving and refining information called the Feynman method. It's very simple. All you have to do is that you take out a sheet of paper, you write the name of the concept that you want to explore onto the top of it, and then you try to explain in as simple language as you can, as if like to a fifth grader, what the concept is. And it kind of like tells you whether you know much about the concept or not. Now, like on the base, like that's kind of like it in its most pure form. But what it's also incredibly good at is leading you down different avenues of questioning and uncovering aspects of a subject that you might not even have like initially thought of. So I actually have some notes from the most recent one I did on contour that I could kind of walk you through really quickly. So musical contour, the idea that a line goes up and it goes down and all that sort of great stuff. I didn't really have a good understanding. I felt as if I didn't really have a good understanding of the depth of contour, like all the things that it could unlock and that it could do. So I decided, well, I'll do some Feynman notes on it and see what I come up with. I didn't even know where to start, but I was also reminded from this quote from, I think it was that Mastery book, where this author said when he didn't know what to do, he just started writing, and eventually, like, he was able to clarify his thoughts. He's able to clarify an avenue to go down upon. So I started from this idea of like neighbor tones versus passing tones, because like, oh, okay, well, that seems like contour related. I actually like completely abandoned that like 2 sentences later. I'm reading through all my notes right now because I also have like how I arrived there. But like here's some stuff I highlighted from my notes. I said contour is basically, you have to go up or down. That's the concept of contour, essentially. It's this duality. You can't go completely up for the end of time, or else the line gets too monotonous. So you eventually have to make your way back down. So that's kind of something we could establish right off the bat, is that, we have to change contour eventually, or else our melodies get too stale. And then I kind of surmised that into, it's not the up or down that are intrinsically valuable, it's their interplay. Then I thought to myself, okay, well, so there's this up and downness of contour. Like that's like the smallest level of contour is whether a melody goes up or down. But then there's also like this kind of this next step where melodies take on shapes from their contours. So I chalked that up too. I said, okay, well, there must be different levels of contour, because there's the smallest level where, you either go up or down. And then there's that kind of next level where you can make shapes out of it. You can have a completely, straight line going up, completely straight line going down. You can have like bell curves. You can have melodies going up and down, like which in every way. And I thought, well, you get very different sensations depending on the intervals you choose. So I started, studying the relationship between intervals and contour and everything as well. So I basically uncovered all these different avenues, and I was able to kind of settle on 5 different areas of contour that I wanted to explore.
Hmm.
And I called these my contouric areas of interest. I'll list them off for you now. So the first one I
Okay.
have is contour implying rhythmic figures. This is something I didn't even know of until I think I
Hmm.
watched some YouTube video. It was either you or 8-Bit Music Theory, where there was this mention of like homogeneous rhythms going up or down. With their change of contour, they imply like a rhythmic figure. Like a Junichi Masuda in his battle themes, he has a very common bass figure where it's like 2/8 or like 3/8 notes going up, and then the pattern kind of just continues. So it's like ba da da ba da da ba da da ba da da ba da da,
Mm.
and that implies like a dotted eighth note, or that implies a dotted quarter note. For like in 4/4.
Yeah. You're right. You're right. Yeah, I see what you're talking about.
So
Yeah,
it's like,
yeah.
oh, that's really interesting. So there's that relationship between rhythm and contour. Okay, and then I'll come back to that in a minute. Then I also have number two, contour as a memorable shape or motif in and of itself. Just from my own transcriptions that I've analyzed, I've noticed that you can kind of take contour, you can change the intervals within the contour, like, going forward with the melody. But as long as the shape is still there, the listener accepts it. So you can
Mm.
use contour as a means to, link a piece together or continue it. There's also this concept of contour expansion or contour contraction. I guess the way I would describe this is there's this, going back to the French dudes, there's this track by Justice called Stress. Near the end, there's this portion where there's like a bell-shaped contour going from up back to down. So, it's like a little hill. The melody for its first 2 bars has a rate of like one bell-shaped curve within a measure. But then for the third and fourth, or no, it would be an 8-bar phrase. First two
Mm.
measures have like one of the bells within them, and then going
Sixth,
forward,
seventh. Sorry, seventh and eighth would be different, or you
yeah,
mean the
yeah.
second
So
half?
so so yeah. So the ones afterwards, they have like a bell shape that takes up 2 measures in total. So I can sing the melody for you because I'm kind of losing track of myself here, even where it's
Mm.
like ba da 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 da. That'd be our first shape, and then it goes on ba da 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 da. And then after this, it starts to expand. So where like it gets a big climb upwards and then a big climb down. Ba da 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 ba da 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 da.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, not the best vocal performance, but it gets the point across.
Yeah.
I was looking into it and I was like, oh, okay, this is like an actual thing. Like they use like different methods of motivic variation to kind of justify this big climb and this big climb up, this big climb down. Also goes back to contrast where, you have these two little instances of the bell curve, and then later on you have this big instance that really accentuates the end of the phrase.
Hmm.
Then I'm almost here. I'm on number four. Then I had like implications of methods of motivic variation on contour. So how different methods of motivic variation have effects on contour. So I broke that down even further, which I'll touch upon in a minute. I won't go as in depth, but then like finally I had implying separate voices within a single line. That has to deal with contour to some extent because you have to go far enough down or far enough up within the register to separate these two parts of the line. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I had subcategories within all of these, and if I touch upon all of them, would be here all day. But it was really funny because it's like, starting out, I had no idea what I was gonna go into. All I knew is that okay, up and down, you got to change stuff up a little bit. But then I saw like all these
Mm.
different devices and relationships between contour and all these different aspects of musicality that I had no idea was there, and that I wouldn't have discovered honestly unless I took this sort of thing to paper and used the Feynman method.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah, and like it opened up all these different like I said, even though I had like these areas I was able to pin down, they each all have their own questions. So like for the
Yeah.
first one, contour applying rhythmic figures, I asked myself, well, what if the rhythms in the pattern aren't equal values? Like Junichi Masuda's bass lines, they're always homogeneous eighths. What if they aren't? Um, what if I take a contouric figure, like say I have a contour figure that's rising up every 3 notes, but I embed that within a rhythmic figure that has like its own value of notes. So where the phase of the contour figure and the phase of the rhythmic figure, kind of clash with each other,
Hmm.
and they end up creating this like larger meta pattern
Right.
once they finally get back in phase again. So like it's led me to all these different crazy ideas that I never would have thought of getting to.
Yeah. There's I wanted to bring up. I remembered a another blog post by Masuda, and he was talking about essentially that idea. I'll post a link to all these posts if I can find them. But
Hmm.
I saved a screenshot of this. I'm going to read this verbatim, so some of the
Sure.
English may be a little weird, but he said, things you look at every day or things you take for granted. Most of them are associated with some kind of idea and are fixed firmly in the brain. They have such a strong hold on our mind as if they were struggling to keep their own place. The existence of the refrigerator or the air conditioner or electricity, the shape of a TV screen or a keyboard, the shapes of a cell phone, a character font, a word or a pictogram, etc., the shape of a car or its handle, the act of going to a movie theater, a ticket purchase, and the darkness, the steps you follow in buying a ticket or getting on the train, the way politics, economy, society, and culture works, their own rules and assumptions, the rotation of the earth, a star shape, a heart shape. Every one of the above is so easy to picture in your head as if it's nothing special. Rather, it's almost frightening. These are all fixed ideas in the brain. Fixed ideas. Yes, the very start of game creation is to break down fixed ideas because there's nothing predetermined when you create contents. It's up to you to decide how to create a world or how to show it. So, if you want to be a bird and fly around the globe, it's possible, and it's also possible to go back in time and to take a walk or run on a futuristic motorbike at full speed. It's also possible to come up with the ultimate pachinko machine. If you think this way, it's fun. Your dreams start expanding. You can see what's possible is expanded in a sweeping, endless way. This is the most fun part, but because of that, it gets a reality check from the fixed ideas in my brain. To try to think outside the fixed ideas. Why that shape? Why that way? What makes you think that? You need to question the question of the thing itself, or the thing itself. I think so, not only in making games, but also in any kind of job or in any way of life. Let's break down our fixed ideas.
That's actually like I remember that blog post as well because I read through it like a year ago or so, and that one really stood out to me. Funnily enough, that brought me back to a Richard Feynman story
Hmm.
where I forget exactly what it was. I think it was like how plates rotate. He was like in the school cafeteria, and he
Hmm.
was fixated on like someone like spinning plates on their finger. Maybe it was like those like carnival tricks, spinning plates.
Hmm.
And he was like, oh, okay, well that's kind of interesting. I wonder like why that happens. And he started like to delve in the problem like really heavily, and he even had classmates tell him like, oh, that seems so redundant, Richard. Why are you like delving into something that's like so like seemingly obvious? And well, long story short, all of his tinkerings with the plate spinning and like disc spinning and all that ended up to him establishing a new like subset of physics that he's most famous for, quantum electrodynamics.
That's amazing.
So it's like
Yeah.
there's a lot of value in questioning the stuff that seems like so fundamental. I mean, it's
Hmm.
fundamental. There's a lot that's packed within it that you can derive out of it.
Yeah, and it's not like you're questioning it because of any like doubt of the process or anything like that, but it's just like, why does it work like this? And what can I derive from that that can be applied to other things?
Absolutely.
So, one of the things I wanted to discuss, and I could take that into a million directions, and I'll hold on doing that unless we come back around to it. I wanted to. So you brought up in our discussions when I had mentioned the tweet that I did at the beginning of this recording.
Yeah.
that you had thought of a lecture on Christianity that you'd seen, and I wanted to discuss that
Oh
because you,
yeah.
yeah,
There was I think it was posted in the server. There's been a lot of discussion recently on like Christianity, religion, and so forth. There was a lecture posted by a Canadian professor, Jordan Peterson, on interpreting Christianity in terms of like I guess the archetypes that the human brain holds, and I guess just the way that religion is derived from a human experience. At least that's kind of like
hmm
what I'm getting from it so far.
hmm
Um, oh, what exactly about it struck your fancy?
So you brought up a verse from Proverbs. There's Proverbs 9:10. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom.
Oh yeah,
And
when I first heard
yeah,
that, I was like, oh my god, that's so true to like music. So to kind of like interpret it a
yeah, because
bit.
that really fascinated me, and I wanted you to talk about it.
So the fear of God isn't like you cowering because you're afraid He's gonna smite you. It's
Yeah, it's
more
not
like
that kind of fear.
yeah, it's like oh my god. It's more of you realize that like this guy here is omnipotent, omniscient. Like you really can't best him.
hmm
He he's God to put to put in a word. So like to think of yourself as being above him or to be able to like to doubt him or to cheat him or anything is is incredibly foolish. That's why pride is the greatest sin in the Bible, because you have Lucifer who tries to do exactly that. He essentially tries to become God or like decree himself as such and defy
hmm
God. And by
And
doing that,
before we like continue, like,
yeah,
I mean, I'm a Christian, and I have been my whole life. I don't know if you are, but I like, regardless of any of you listening, we're, I think, regardless of our religious beliefs, there's some degree of wisdom that can be derived from like thinking about this kind of stuff. Not even necessarily literally, but like in
oh,
more
absolutely.
abstract ways, and that's why we're discussing this.
Oh, that's the
Anyways,
thing
continue.
too, is that all these sort of concepts. It's like even though there's some stuff that people might not necessarily agree with, or that they don't see the relevance to it. Like there's so much that is relevant and that we can take and apply in our lives to kind of enrich it and understand things. Like for me, like this sort of whole talk that I'm about to get into, it's effectively how I see it is it's secular. It's
hmm
it's not necessarily religious, but like there's this wisdom within this like little proverb that is so far reaching, which I'll touch upon now. So of course, like the that's essentially what the fear of God means. It's not that you're cowering fear. It's just that you're kind of subservient to this higher sort of thing. The fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Okay, well, why is that? Well, how I saw it is that once I understood that this sort of thing that you've been bringing up throughout the our talk today, of that you felt subservient to music, that you were subject to something higher. Um, I got the same sensation from music in a sense, in that uh, the more that I realized as I was getting into composition and everything, I had to play within the boundaries of this force, and
hmm
to get the end result that I was seeking. I kind of like on the opposite flip side of things. I guess I could kind of go into like how I originally started out with music, where I was like, oh, music theory stifles creativity. All this sort of stuff, which I had
hmm
no basis for saying because I had no idea what music theory was. I was just,
mm
this is something I've been talking about with people as well. I guess I'll touch on this for a minute and then tie it back. I had no understanding of music theory. Um, all the people that make the music that I love do, though, and I realized, okay, well, I guess that's something. and
Seems
they're making all,
indicative of something,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, they're making all this great music, and then I see all these people like, oh no, man, just play from your heart. Music theory is garbage. You don't need to. They weren't at where I wanted to be musically, so I took a real good look, and I thought, well, maybe there's something here. So I ended up delving into music theory. I found all these sort of different principles. I'm not even talking stuff like like parallel fifths and everything, like pedagogical principles, but like there's like the idea of three, where you have like a repetition or near repetition of something two times, and then on the third instance of it, you have to change it up a little bit more, so, and that like really
Hmm.
makes makes a song, and you see this in everything.
Yeah, and I
And I
found
started
that in
like,
my own experience that I kind of have to, by the third repetition, sometimes I've got to alter it a bit.
yeah, well, this is just something of human psychology, honestly. I was
Hmm.
watching Tom and Jerry with my nephew, like a few months back, and there was a joke where you see Tom's like trying to do something, and like off camera, there's a little hand that comes up and like taps him on the shoulder, and you see it's Jerry, the mouse, like just trying to mess with him. So Tom swats him away. It happens again. A hand comes up and taps Tom on the shoulder. It's Jerry. He swaps him away.
Hmm.
Third time comes, hand taps him on the shoulder. Tom takes like a frying pan and smacks him upside the head as soon as he turns around. Well, it turns out it's not Jerry the mouse this third time. It's actually Spike the dog,
Yeah,
who like beats Tom senseless, which is the joke. And
yeah.
but it's that same idea going where you have this establishment of two things. You establish them twice. The first one is the introduction of it. The second one is to establish a pattern. The third one plays within the realm of the pattern, but it also switches things up to keep things interesting, so it's not monotonous. It's stuff like this. It's like it's these aspects of human psychology that we're subservient to. They've always existed. Mozart fundamentally works the same way as Michael Jackson, even though they have completely different like harmonic languages. Even though like they're still based in the same harmonic, like they're still based in the same harmonic language. They have different harmonic dialects, I should say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Different ideas how to develop melodies and everything. But they still have this rule of three. They still have this idea of that you have to contrast. They still have this idea that there's climaxes and everything. These are things we can't get away from, and we need to learn about these most important things and how we're subservient to them if we want to bring the most out of our music.
Hmm.
And that's effectively like kind of how I interpreted that verse, at least in the realm of music composition.
So it's like in typical pop song form, you'll have like a verse, pre-chorus, chorus, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, like that repeats twice, and then the third time you go to like a bridge or something or a guitar solo or something that's different.
Yeah.
About 2/3 of the way through. I also thought of the golden ratio, and that's about like roughly 2/3 of the way through. That you should expect something that's different.
I actually haven't read into the golden ratio very much, but I know that it
I don't
was
know much about it, but like that's kind of the general idea that about 2/3 of the way through a process that something is different. That would be the ideal place to put something different.
okay. Yeah, I could definitely see that. I
That's
mean,
an
like we said,
extremely terrible reduction of it to like I don't know how many orders of magnitude I have to stress that that's a terrible reduction of it, but like
it's
yeah,
okay. Well, I think like the idea that we're just all going back to the rule of thirds. Effectively, that's the
right,
theme
yeah,
here.
that's what I'm trying to get across. Yeah.
No, like absolutely. Uh, I come across in my writing every day, and I do it in all levels of form. It's like when I write a melody, um, what I usually like to do is I like to have this statement of it. I like to sequence it up or down. How many, and then I have a little alteration that the melody then develops from third time around. There's a saying, I forget what it was or who said it exactly, but it says something to the extent that true genius only shows itself by bar five, because because that's like where that sort of thing comes in. It's like that's where you have to develop. You can't just you can't like sit on those first two instances because it's just too easy.
Hmm.
The third of the rule of three is where like the magic really happens.
I
So
like
like
that.
there's that aspect of of contrast, but then on a higher level up, it's like, okay, why do we have A section and B section? Well, they're contrasting sections. Okay, why do we have different songs within an album? Same exact reason.
Yeah, if I can rabbit trail here,
Hmm.
I've been thinking a lot about tracklists. I guess that's the wrong thing to say. I haven't been thinking a lot about it, but it's been on my mind.
About what
And
exactly?
so let's say that you have a track list for a
Oh,
soundtrack or an
tracklist,
album,
tracklist. Okay, yeah,
and
yeah.
it's like I was thinking to myself about how when I listen to albums and in some of my own albums, like you'll have certain songs that stand out that are noteworthy and that are like the ones that are going to be like the favorites among listeners and stuff like that. And it's you can often tell when that's going to be the case,
Yeah.
and which I think is absolutely fascinating. Like I remember when I was playing Splatoon 2 when it came out during the first Splatfest, there were a number of songs for the off the hook songs for the Splatfest theme, and there was one of them in particular called Ebb and Flow that like I knew was going to be the like that was
Sound
going
of
to
the
be their
summer.
big hit, yeah, and that's exactly the case. Like they, I mean, it seems to be everybody's favorites according to like play counts and just seeing it mentioned so much, and like Nintendo knows it too. Like it shows up again as a motif throughout Octo Expansion, and it's the last song played at their concerts. And anyways, the point being that like there are going to be certain songs that stand out, and then there are going to be other songs that aren't as that are going to be more low key and are not as notable. And I I was thinking about how it's like I suppose there's this idea that you would want to have every song on an album be like something amazing that really stands out.
Yeah.
But then I asked myself, like, is that necessarily the case? Because, like, does every song have to be some sort of a hit? Because
Well, that's the thing too.
when I
Hmm.
listen to albums that are like collections of hits, like, I mean, that's great and all, but it's not
It's very
cohesive.
one-dimensional.
Yeah, it's very one dimensional. And I feel like I get a more enriching experience out of an album which has some hits, like really great pieces, and then other pieces that are, I don't want to say less good, but like you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The wording here is really tricky, but I know what you're like. They don't leap out. It's not like this radio ready.
Right,
You're not going to be like whistling along to it on the
right,
radio.
exactly.
But that doesn't mean that they're not important.
Yeah, it's like, is it
And
important to have tracks like
yeah,
that?
well, I think I'm really trying to think of how to articulate my language with this, because of course every song like has to be good, but that's not the question here.
Right.
I'd say the most important thing, honestly, is just having a contrast of characters. Everything kind of goes back to contrast in a way. Looking at, I'm reading an article right now on Daft Punk's third album, Human After All. And this is something that has kind of been on my mind in this realm, because the whole record is kind of like this dark, dreary, anti-media sort of theme. Of course, like they're not really well known for the lyricism. The one track just says robot rock for like 5 minutes straight. But it's kind of expressed in the sound as well. Really like dark, gritty electronic synths and everything. But then there's this one song called "Make Love," where it's this like very dynamic piano bass line, like bass line in like the really high register, and it's not buzzy at all or anything. Really smooth, and it's playing these really nice, beautiful chords. And then so like in that sort of aspect, it stands out on the record a lot. And it's just supposed to be like this little ballad. There's not like a crazy, cool ear-catching melody or anything.
Mm-hmm.
But having that such like strong contrasting character relative to everything else, even though like it's a very subdued character in and of itself, like really stands out and makes the track. But then like right after that, you have the song "Make Love," which is super soft. Right after that, you have probably like the hardest song on the record, "Brainwasher," which is just like this. It's basically in two, and it's just this really like driving, repetitive, aggressive ba-na-na-na-na, 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 over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And with these, well, having those two right next to each other, it clarifies their own characters. If every single track on the record was this dark, gritty, fast-paced, aggressive song, then like none of them are really going to stick out from one another, and it's going to get really boring to listen to because it's just way too monotonous and homogenous. But if every single track has its own sort of character that that it's based within, they stand out within each other. You can clearly clarify one from the next, and they
Mm-hmm.
also enrich the composition as a whole. It's like going back to the sandwich sort of thing. You don't want a bread sandwich. You don't want every track having the same character. It's like, okay, well, what if I just have a ham and bread sandwich? It's like, okay, that's a little bit better, but you can do more than that. You can get
Mm-hmm.
lettuce, onions, mustard, all these sort of different things which clarify one another, and they add their own special kind of zest that only they can add, that as a whole flesh out this grain composition to where the parts are amazing, even though some stick out more than others. It's like I can have like a little bit of onion that just makes everything else pop, but
Yeah.
that sort of thing. Like it's all about you need strong inner workings, but they also need to have their own sense of character to flesh out the work as a whole, and to make
Mm-hmm.
the whole rich and invigorating.
So there are some pieces of music in a track list, in a well-ordered track list, that are served more as a support to the rest of the album, and other songs that need the support of the more low-key ones to get have their impact.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there needs to be like some like not lesser tracks, but tracks with like less focus on them.
Tracks that have a support focus
Yeah, they have a
to
support
the
focus.
other pieces of music.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like ballads work a lot in that sense on records.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really like a lot of '70s records in that, like, unfortunately, like back then, they would kind of have the hit single, and then they would have an album with a bunch of filler ballads just to sell, and
Mm.
like that's not the way to do it. But on something like Daft Punk's Discovery, there's this track Night Vision where it's almost like atmospheric. It's based off this track from the '70s, 10cc's shit, I forget the name of it. But anyways, more importantly, it has the like function of a ballad to kind of like make things a little bit more intimate, and kind of calm things down a little bit once you're about to get this track that hits at like 140 temp or 140 BPM.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's definitely like every song ideally should have an important function. Like some songs are going to be more like hit friendly, but that doesn't mean that the songs that aren't have no purpose or only there as filler. They
Right.
need to be good. They need to be good within themselves. They need to be they need to support the album as well by having a contrasting character from everything else.
It's like the in anime, how you have stuff that's like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the shonen genres and like the really action-packed series, and then you have the occasional slice of life episode that just kind of like gives you a
Yeah,
breather.
it fleshes out the characters too.
Yeah, yeah,
It
that
gives a
too.
chance for
Like there's
character
plenty of
development.
purpose for it.
And ideally too, it's like those filler episodes. I don't really. I mean, I know what you're talking about. I haven't watched TV and films like in years though. I never really delved into anime apart from like uh, Evangelion. But
Hmm.
I mean that's kind of important for anything with a character, anything with literary characters is to kind of just give them a room to breathe and give them life and to humanize them. and show different colors of them, that we can kind of resonate with on a daily level to make them feel personal and flesh them out, and to make them feel like actual people, and also just to enrich, the character as a whole and the story as a whole, because, we have these characters that we can kind of see they're doing stuff in daily life, and it makes them seem less like a plot device or less like like an
Right.
instrument to explore the themes of the stories,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
more
and
personal.
it's kind of funny that you say that because like I in the sort of music that I write, I guess probably in part due to the nature of the inspiration that I get, I try to treat instruments as though they are people or characters in a sense.
Mm-hmm.
So like they're actors, and they some of them are just extras and they only show up here and there, and then others are like the lead
Yeah, like it's what
roles.
drives the piece. Well, that's the thing
Right.
too. It's like when I write a piece of music, I always I always do the melody beginning of the piece to the end, because everything else is shaped around that. Everything else works off of the melody.
Some of my pieces are too like a lot of times my arrangements are and melodies are like intertwined to the extent that I can't really change one or the other, so I kind of have to come up with
Yeah,
both of them at the same time. But when I have the option, I always try to come up with the melody first, or at least to the degree that I can, before I focus on anything else. Primarily just because melodies are hardest for me to write, most difficult for me to write, and at least with arrangement, it's to me it's a little more technical, and so like I
yeah.
can kind of once I've expended my creative energy, I can
Kind of relax in a
still
way.
work. Yeah, I can kind of relax a little bit and work with the arrangement. It's still difficult, but it's like it requires a little less creative energy for me because it's more about like rearranging and like, okay, how do I fit this into a way that's intelligible?
Yeah, exactly.
But I know that like everybody has different ways of approach. Because like I've been asked before, it's like, do you start with a rhythm or with a drum part or with a melody or with chords or whatever? I think everybody has different answers to those, and
Yeah,
for me,
absolutely.
it really it depends on the song. I would prefer to start with the melody because like that's sometimes I can because I've written songs that are fully fleshed out arrangements and I don't have a melody and they just stay unfinished because I don't have a melody for them.
Hmm.
But anyways, I'm going on a tangent at this point.
I think Chris has talked about that's like the way he works is that he'll get like the arrangement and all that, and then he'll like find the melody within it, which is like completely opposite from me. I find that really
Yeah.
fascinating too. Um, well, I was gonna say, so do you find arrangement like the most natural thing to come up with?
I mean, I guess so. I really don't find anything about composition very natural for me.
Yeah,
It's a very difficult process for me.
no, I agree.
But
Like,
maybe in part due to how exact and specific I try to be because I don't like I try to be very careful with every single making sure every single note has a reason to be there.
absolutely.
And so maybe that perfectionism kind of stifles kind of takes the fun out of it and the naturalness out of it, but I strive for it anyways because it's more fulfilling to me. But
I agree.
I wouldn't say that. Well, I would say if anything comes easy to me, it's harmony, in the sense that of coming up with chords to go underneath melodies. If I
Hmm.
have a melody, the harmony is just implicit to me generally.
Yeah, that makes sense. A really good exercise is like laying out the harmonic foundation, because where the benefit from that comes is that you can kind of like shape the tonal direction of the piece, which is of course really important. Uh, And having like the tonal structure of the piece in place, or section, however much you want to apply it, you can shape the melody out of that, which is something that I started to do when I didn't really have a very good sense of like just pulling melodies and writing around chord progressions. So instead, I just started out with the chord progressions and like the structure of the harmony. I would find tones that I thought I could get to in a nice way in each one, and then I would write the melody around that, and it got me some pretty good results. And I think that's actually like helped my melody writing a lot.
Well, when I'm trying to come up with a melody, since I generally start from that position, I'm this conversation is definitely like going way more into like the practical and technical side of things than
Yeah.
it has been, but that's fine. Um, I I'm curious to know what your way of approaching melody, like if that is so okay. So if you start with a arrangement, you can derive the melody from that, and you have pieces that you can work from. But if you're starting with the melody, and if you start with the arrangement, that's well,
So you basically
my thoughts are jumbled all over the place,
it's
and
all
I'm trying
good.
to throw the pieces together.
So you
But like,
start. So you're starting
let's
with melody, and were you? I get a sense that you're going to ask about rhythm, because I know that's something that you've asked me about.
not quite. I was
Okay.
going to ask about like, so if you're trying to write a melody, if you already have the arrangement in place, you can derive the melody from it. However, if you're starting with the melody initially before you do anything else, you need to get it from somewhere. And so, like, I was curious to know how you go about that, because, like, if there's any systemization to that. Because, like, for me, I try to. I've tried in the past to just kind of like noodle away at an instrument, and I always find myself going to things that it's just muscle memory for me, and I play things that I'm familiar with, and that usually doesn't help me at all. And so, whenever I try to write melodies, I try to just like let it come up out of my head rather than doing anything else. And there's lots of different ways you could approach it, but I'm like it's something that has to like strike me as an inspiration before I can
Yeah. Um.
continue.
I mean, for me, what I found most helpful is that the most success I've ever gotten is if I've done, is if I kind of set my melody up, like I was talking about before, with like those cooking analogies.
Setting up some
So
parameters.
yeah, if I set up some parameters, how I kind of view it is that it's like when you build a jigsaw puzzle, and like the first step is pretty much always to get the corner pieces and put them all
Right.
around so you get a frame. I do the exact same thing. So I think of the section and I'm like, okay, well, do I want this to end on the first scale degree, like to bring it to a conclusive sense? Do I want it to end on a one, on 1 or 5, in the first place? Or do I want it to end on the first scale degree, or do I not want that much resolution and stuff
Do you
like
want to say
that?
something conclusive, or do you want to like lead into something
Yeah,
else?
so really I start kind of with like the nature of the cadence. And then I lay the harmonic foundation, and then I lay key tones in the melody that like there's a hierarchy of tones, like the most obvious example of this is if we're just like ornamenting a melody, ornamenting a tone, but it's not that extreme. There's a continuum of it, so some notes are more important than others. Of course, chord tone's going to be more important than non-chord tones and everything like that. So anyways, I decide on the nature of my cadence, I decide on the harmony that the melody is going to express, and then I decide on important notes. These can be subject to change depending on the nature of the melody. And then I come up with a little idea that I start with at the very beginning of the melody, whatever the hell it might be. And then I guess I kind of think about the nature of the melody and what's characteristic about it. So just the other day, I was working on a melody where it starts off with a big leap, and then it kind of compensates itself by moving down by seconds for like a couple notes, like ba da da da, or there's another one that's like ba da da da. So you have that second progression, and
I
then
like
you have
that.
that leap down. Yeah, dude, this is a track that I've been trying to like make the melody like perfect tone it. That's another story for another day. But I look at that and I think, okay, well, what's characteristic about that? Well, I have, like in that little example, the one that you liked, ba da da da. I have that contrast of secondary moves at first, but then it, kind of gets accented by a leap at the end. So I have that contrast of intervals between the former and latter half.
Mm-hmm.
I have a homogeneous rhythm throughout since they're all just eighths. Ba da da da. And then it also kind of has like a little bit of an ending. Like I'll just sing the sequence. Ba da da ba. Ba da 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 da. So I had that little space in between both instances. So I'm basically just taking notes of the different aspects, and I think, okay, well, you know, how human beings work is that we need some stuff, some similarity to ground us, going forward with this melodic idea, but there also has to be changes to kind of switch things up. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to preserve some aspects while I change others. Which is kind of like the root of multi development. But then it's the question of what do I change, what do I preserve, which is a
Right.
question in of itself. I just kind of look at the aspects of where I can like afford to change. So
Mm-hmm.
I guess to give an example, this is where the melody kind of starts. Is this ba da da da, but then at the cadence, it goes ba da 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 da. And if we listen to both of those, if we had them both on sheet music, we can see it's still the same bass pattern. It's still that progression of seconds with a leap. Ba da da da. That's the one at the cadence. But I
Mm-hmm.
add a couple notes to it as a pickup. Ba da
Right.
da 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 da. And I also dot the
Yeah,
first
because it's
rhythm.
kind of confined by where it's headed that you need to have something to connect it.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess I just do little changes like that, and then it's like, okay, well, maybe like even in the first example where I had the ba da da da, ba da 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 da, maybe I could ramp up tension a little bit by utilizing a little extra silence and putting something within it. So I go like ba da 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 da. I'm kind of just pulling stuff out of my butt right now, so it's not gonna sound
Right,
very
right.
good. But like, there's that
Hmm.
silence there that I can take advantage of if I want to ramp up tension. If I want to ramp up tension as well, I could maybe I could not elongate, but um, take that interval leap at the end and make it even wider, or maybe I could make it smaller if I want to like
Hmm.
kind of downplay the tension of it as well. But there's still that idea of seconds interval, but that interval I can kind of change the size of it depending on how much tension I want. So if I take that figure and I kind of like revert it up, if I go so ba da 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 ba da da da, I still have
Hmm.
that second part, but I could go like ba da 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 ba da 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 or ba da 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 ba da 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 da. I basically did the concept that I was just talking about, where I take the rhythmic space and I put notes within it with faster note values to amp up the tension, but I also take
Hmm.
that aspect of the secondary walk up or the secondary walk with the leap up, and I make the leap larger to give more tension. So, I
Hmm.
guess overall, what my advice is derive, like, you don't necessarily have to pull stuff out of the abyss constantly. See what you already have, the
Hmm.
nature
And
of
play
it.
within that.
Yeah, see what you already have, the nature of it, what's characteristic of that nature, and how you can exploit that nature throughout time to get interesting musical results.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like, well, it's kind of like what you were saying about contour. I mean that in a meaning divorced from the practical. So like you had this idea about contour, and it was like maybe one sentence about it, and you
Yeah,
didn't think you
exactly.
really knew anything about it, and then you inspected it and decided to play games with it, with that idea, and you came up with this huge, like very in depth list of qualities that you could talk about and go into just from that. And so, I guess what you're saying, like, if I have something of a melody or a portion of one or whatever, I can. That doesn't have to be the be all end all of it. I don't have to continue reaching for more. I could take that and like there's probably a lot that I can extract out of that just from what I have.
This kind of ties back into that concept of character that we had at the beginning, where it's like, okay, you have this character that you want to strive for in a piece. So how do I best how do I best represent it and express it? The answer is within that character. You derive, from that sensation that you're trying to, showcase.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what I kind of do is, yeah, I just take my melody and I try to put it through different aspects of that character and shed different lights on it. And, eventually, hopefully a piece turns out. There's some things, it's not as simple as that, of course. There are some things that you also have to pay attention to as you go forward in time. You have to break new areas of register. You also have to have different contrasts in order to enrich the piece and everything. But all of it can be done within the nature of the melody and adhering to it. And I think that's where like a lot of the power lies. Just write your melodies in respect to your melodies, and if you do that, then it's just like pure melody. There's nothing else to it. Like it's just melody in its most concentrated form. There's no reason not to do it.
Okay, so can you tell people where they can find you?
So where you can find
If
me.
they want to read more of your, if they want to get in touch with you or read more about your thoughts.
So I have the website on which the articles that I talked about initially will be posted soon enough. FrenchTouchComposition.com. My Twitter handle for that is FTComposition. You can email me at FrenchTouchComposition@gmail.com, of course. That'd be like the best avenues, honestly. I'm going full force with this thing because the songwriting and this stuff is so good, but like no one talks about it, and I want to be the one to talk about it. And this is what has got me into songwriting in the first place. Is all those guys. This is what has driven me to learn all this stuff. So honestly, just talk to me on those terms. You can hit me up there. I want to say thank you, Josh, for inviting me on and having this great conversation.
Absolutely.
I really enjoyed it. I learned a lot from you. And this is the sort of stuff I wish I could talk about with people at school, but like no one wants to do it. Well, I have to go on and I guess continue my life.
Yes.
But thanks so much for having me on, though.
Thank you for joining. Go have a sandwich.
Absolutely. Ooh, that sounds good right now, actually.